So in Anna Lembke's book, Dopamine Nation, there's this really interesting part early on in the book where she's discussing a patient who's addicted to marijuana, who's using marijuana in such a way that it's impacting her life very negatively, right? So, wow, who can, that's kudos to her for actually going there, I guess, right? But then she kind of takes it back because she talks about how the patient goes for a month on her little detox from marijuana, feels great, feels amazing, feels wonderful. Doc, you were right, I feel great. I can focus, I don't have the anxiety isn't gone. But you know what? Knowing all this, I think I'm going to go back to smoking pot, but I'm just not going to do it as much. And Anna Lembke's response is, research shows that patients are in fact able to self-regulate and able to go back to their drug of choice in amounts that are lower, that don't cause a problem. And so that you can't say that, hey, it's abstinence or nothing, because there's plenty of people who do end up being able to just use an amount of a drug, their drug of choice, that doesn't negatively impact their lives. To that, I'm going to say, if we're measuring that by how many patients come back to her with a problem, or surveys of people who drink and use drugs, I'm wondering how familiar researchers and Anna Lembke is with how people discuss the amounts of alcohol they drink when they feel like they have a problem versus when they don't feel like they have a problem. So, when people feel like they have a problem with alcohol and alcohol's ruining their life and they need help and they want help, they are going to tell you exactly how much they drink. And in some cases, they might even overstate that. And because I know in my personal experience, for instance, I remember when at the very worst of my problem, I was describing to a person over the phone at a rehab facility how much I was drinking, and I got the impression that maybe I wasn't drinking enough, or maybe that they weren't really that impressed by the amount to really believe that I had maybe as big of a problem, or that everything could be as bad as maybe I'm saying it is. Of course, that's all in my head, that they didn't say that. But keep in mind that just 10 to 12 drinks for somebody who's been drinking for years, whose liver is severely impacted, is going to be a lot different. So alcoholics, the worse they become, are able to drink far less and become increasingly more intoxicated. So there's tolerance where people can drink more and not seem to be impaired, or not feel like they are impaired, right? Even though they are, and handle greater amounts of alcohol. But at the same time, there's also a later stage where they are not able to handle the same amounts of alcohol at all. So that's, going by that, you can't really determine so much about whether someone's life is totally out of whack based upon the number of drinks. And going back to what I was saying about surveying people and asking them how much they drink, when they don't feel like they have a problem, I'm inclined to believe, and this is based partially on my own experience, that they're not going to give an accurate picture of how much they drink in a couple of different ways, for a couple different reasons here. So first, people are aware when doctors and others are asking them about how much they drink, what is considered to be normal, non-problem drinking, and what they actually drink. So if they don't consider themselves as having a problem, they may want to be honest and say they do drink, okay, but they're going to say that they drink an amount that's considered to be non-problematic or moderate, because that is how they feel like alcohol is affecting them. They don't feel like it's affecting their lives negatively. They feel like they enjoy it in moderation, they have control over it. Therefore, why give a false impression by listing an amount that might seem shocking or problematic to the person asking? So, you might say, I drink a couple of beers a night, even though you're drinking 4 or 5. And you might rationalize that in such a way as saying, well, a non-drinker who drinks 4 or 5 beers is going to be drunk, and they're going to be out of sorts, and they're going to, that's going to be a whole different thing than me because I'm so accustomed to this. It's been years, and so 4 or 5 beers for me is like 2 beers. You see? And also, if you don't feel like you have a problem, you don't have a problem, you're not going to tell somebody something that leads them to believe you have a problem. You're not going to give them a number of drinks that leads them to believe you have a problem, because in a way, that's kind of dishonest, isn't it? You're leading to believe that you have a problem when you don't. The other part about this too is, we could say a lot of people are not sure about measurements, and nowadays with the amount of alcohol, it used to be at one time, you pretty much had 5% alcohol in beer, and you'd have ice beers, which are like closer to 6%. And that was it, except for now the specialty craft beers, and then of course they would vary somewhat. But with the whole rise of the IPA, the Imperial Pale Ales, now all of a sudden you have these very strong beers that are extremely popular nowadays with younger people. And so we may know that a 24-ounce Budweiser is 2 drinks or 2 beers, right? But what do you call an 18-ounce slim can of IPA? That's an Imperial IPA. That's 9% alcohol. How many drinks is that? I'm inclined to call it 2. And then how fast are you drinking it? So that's the other thing too. People might lie about their drinking, because if they're not drinking 2 beers in quick succession, they're drinking 2 beers over the course of several hours. And so just to be fair, if they're drinking 4 beers over 5 hours, well, they're really drinking 2 beers, right? Aren't they? Because maybe they only get intoxicated to the level of 2 beers. So there's all sorts of ways that people will talk about their drinking. Another example, a family member that gets a 16-ounce glass, pours it full of hard liquor, some sort of maybe soda water or tonic water, something like that, and a lot of ice. And it's not measured out, of course. And they fill it all the way almost to the top. Now, is that a glass full of liquor? No, it's not a glass full of liquor. But is it one shot? No. How much is the ice? How much is the tonic? It's to taste. So, there's not really any saying, but it's not one drink. But they call it one drink. And if you just kind of dispute that, they sip on it for a long time, or they eat or they don't eat with it, which makes an enormous difference. If you eat within a couple of hours, that makes a huge difference versus not eating for 5 hours. And so there's just all different things that come into play here. And again, a lot of it has to do with whether or not somebody feels they have a problem, whether or not they're seeking help. And so if somebody used to have a problem drinking or doing drugs, and now all of a sudden their life's great, they don't have a problem, but they still drink and do drugs, but in a far lesser amount, what are they going to respond to when someone asks? I mean, there's all kinds of people nowadays that say they're sober even though they smoke pot, because smoking pot is not drinking, right? If they used to have a problem drinking, they don't have a problem smoking pot, so they say, I'm sober. Or there's a lot of people that consider themselves sober because they used to be on heroin, but they're not on heroin. They're on, they take Adderall, they drink, and they do it, and they consider themselves, sober enough to go to AA because they're not a junkie, right? So, I don't know. I'm just curious about what goes into this research and finding out how people are able to handle a problem, right? And it also doesn't take into consideration either the fact that when you're younger, and before something's really gotten out of control for a number of years, and the brain's changed, and habits have been really solidified. I don't know if you want to use that word habits or not. It's different. What someone gets away with when they're younger is different than when they get away with when they're older. And somebody who is moderately drinking for their entire life successfully might suddenly not be moderately drinking successfully 6 months from whenever they tell somebody about their consumption, right? So there's just a lot that goes into this. And so the whole idea that you can go back to moderating your alcohol, controlling how much you drink, or drugs, or whatever else, or whatever you want to say about it, it's just kind of, it doesn't take away from the fact that there's some kind of harm involved, especially with alcohol. And, so why not say in Lembke that someone could be have pack-a-day smoker and, you know, go on their little detox for a month and go back to just being a 5 cigarette a day smoker or 2 cigarette a day smoker or whatever it is deemed to be not a problem. I'm just curious about these things. It's just interesting to me how her praise of AA and how she's just kind of like really just falls down on her knees and bows at the feet of AA in some ways. But you know, I'm if you ask somebody who goes to AA about her book, I don't think they're going to have necessarily glowing praise for it. But that's just my little take on that. Thank you for listening. I think I actually did have some things to say this time. I'm not just like talking up my ass about nothing, about how sucky life is, right? So I like to hear your views on this. Just make your views on this a lot shorter than mine, please. Thank you.